I had a stroke in my 20s, which left me in constant chronic pain, like off the scale, like screaming in pain. And at that point, I was looking at end-of-life clinics because I'd had enough. For me, cannabis was like utterly life-changing.
In 2018, medical cannabis became legal in the UK, yet misconceptions persist. Most people I speak with still think that it's inaccessible or that it doesn't even exist as a legitimate treatment, but that's simply not true. Currently, there's a big gap between the 29 million UK adults who have a qualifying condition and could benefit from medical cannabis and the fewer than 1% who have a prescription. In this episode of Psychoactive Minds, I'll guide you step by step on how you can access medical cannabis, and we will hear more from Barton, the first patient to get a cannabis prescription in the UK, who's since been followed by an estimated 65,000 patients that have received a prescription allowing them to buy and consume cannabis legally and safely.
I'm a patient, first and foremost. I was the first patient in the UK to get a prescription when the law changed in 2018. I did so because I have chronic pain. I had a stroke in my 20s, which left me with quite significant damage to my brain, which left me in constant chronic pain, like off the scale, like screaming in pain, chronic pain for about 6 years. And I was on an increasing amount of opiates, morphine, fentanyl, which is 50 times stronger than street heroin. I'd literally tried every option, every licensed option, every unlicensed option, every yoga move, everything that you could possibly imagine. And I got to the point where I just had enough. I was unable to cut up a piece of toast. I was unable to operate a kettle. I was in my 20s and my life had totally collapsed. And at that point, I was looking at end-of-life clinics because I'd had enough. I couldn't think of what it would be like to go another week in that amount of pain. At that point, a friend of mine who'd been mithering me for a while had said, "Come on now, it's time for you to try cannabis." And at that point, I was really resistant. And I was resistant myself because we've all been there when we're kids. We've all had a bad brownie. We've all had a bad experience on the skate park when you've smoked too much and then got into a silly situation. So I was really resistant. I had a lot of misconceptions around cannabis. But she'd left some homegrown Blue Dream in a Tupperware in my tea cabinet and said, "It's there." And one day I just had a I'm just going to do it moment. And when I came back in the room, my other half started making jokes about what sits and munchies and things. I had this feeling like I was missing something, like I'd lost something. And then I realized that I couldn't feel any pain. And that was the first moment in 6 years of constant burning, full body, electric pain, that it all just stopped. It all just switched off. And that was the night I took my fentanyl patch off and started to withdraw from the pharmaceuticals and started to really take plant medicine and medical cannabis seriously and started to help to support others to campaign to change the laws.
After 7 years since legalization, NHS prescriptions for medical cannabis remain almost impossible to obtain. To date, less than 5 NHS prescriptions have been approved, as most medical cannabis products remain unlicensed. This means they must meet pharmaceutical manufacturing standards but haven't undergone specific clinical trials. There are only 3 licensed cannabis-based products that can be prescribed through the NHS. Epidiolex, which is a highly purified CBD tincture for epilepsy, Nabilone, which is a synthetic form of THC for nausea caused by chemotherapy, and Sativex, a full-spectrum cannabis spray for multiple sclerosis. Patients with other qualifying conditions have to rely on private clinics, creating a two-tier system where medical cannabis becomes a privilege only accessible to those who can afford it. And there are virtually no legal alternatives for those who can't. Despite the plant's therapeutic value, home cultivation is still prohibited and can carry penalties ranging from fines and criminal records to potential imprisonment. However, according to the UK Cannabis Social Club's website, growing less than 7 plants for personal consumption without intent to distribute won't get you jailed.
Charlie's thought to be the first person legally prescribed cannabis-based medicine in the UK. She's paid £2,500 of her own money for the 3-month prescription from a private specialist to treat her chronic pain. though she's now thrilled to be on the right side of the law. She says the steep price tag isn't right. So when her 3 months are up, she's hoping to get the same prescription, but from an NHS specialist.
So I walked into the station and I said, here is my prescription, I can't afford it. I'm going to grow the exact strains that I've been prescribed, the exact weights I've been prescribed, and anything above that I'm going to destroy. What are you going to do? There was a lot of press around that because of what I'd done, and the press got wind, and so the press came round and the press were filming me in the plants, and there was more and more pressure on that police station to do something. There's this woman round the corner is being really gobby about cannabis. Now Sky News are there showing that Brighton police aren't doing anything about these plants. The powers that be sent around a very light touch and a very lovely, it turns out, officer who turned up on her own and carefully came in and spoke to me. It was done very light touch. I spend all day talking to patients who do not have that experience, and at 5 a.m. wake up with very brutal boots through the door. That was not my experience. And that was mainly because the press involvement and the fact that they had to do this in a sensitive way. I have got no idea how people live after they've had that experience that's incredibly traumatic. But she had no real idea what the problem was. She saw my setup. She saw how much it helped me. I showed her all of the drugs I'd come off. And she was really upset with the fact that she had to then pull them out of the pot. And she clearly was a human being who'd signed up to police. And I don't think in her mind that included taking life-saving medicine away from disabled people.
Carly's condition isn't the only one for which medical cannabis can be prescribed. In the UK, patients with a variety of chronic or severe conditions may qualify. Typically, eligibility requires that you've been previously prescribed 2 licensed treatments. However, this is at the discretion of the prescribing specialist, who will consider each patient's case individually. Also, don't worry, you don't need to inhale anything. There are plenty of oils which you can drop into your mouth or into a drink. Edible cannabis is a very easily adjustable way of taking the correct dose and avoiding feeling too intoxicated. When I first tried to access medical cannabis, I thought the process would be harder. I expected the doctor and the clinic staff to push back, but the process was surprisingly smooth. One thing I was surprised to learn was that the 2 failed treatments can include talking therapy, and that there is no requirement for clinics to check that a prescription medication like antidepressants was taken unsuccessfully, only that they were prescribed. I was diagnosed by an online psychiatrist who charged me £360 and added the diagnosis to my medical file, which then enabled me to take the following 4 steps. Step 1. Choose a clinic. There are around 50 across the UK. Websites like MedBudWiki provide detailed information about each clinic and pharmacy. Once you find a clinic that suits you, register online and consent to access your NHS medical records. This will be your initial screening. Step 2. After your initial screening is reviewed, you'll be able to book and pay for a video appointment with a specialist, which lasts between 15 and 60 minutes. Step 3. During this consultation, the specialist will review your medical history, discuss suitable products, and determine dosages. It's important to be honest and open during this session. You won't be penalized for any previous cannabis use. Step 4. Once approved, you'll receive a prescription limited to a 30-day supply. The clinic will send it to your chosen pharmacy, who will post it in smell-proof packaging to your home. A few important things to keep in mind. The guidelines that clinics follow say they should check if you've tried 2 licensed medications or therapies. There are exceptions, and some patients might be approved without meeting all the criteria. There is no need to be nervous. The clinic staff and you are on the same side and will help you determine if medical cannabis makes sense for you. The 2018 law change created hope, but the policy is still struggling to translate into routine clinical care. In reality, there's been a change in principle, but not in practice. I think this is due to a major misconception that medical cannabis is just recreational cannabis rebranded, despite medical cannabis undergoing strict regulatory and clinical validation. As we discussed in a previous video about the endocannabinoid system, the fact is that many recreational users may be unknowingly self-medicating, as cannabis naturally acts as an anti-inflammatory and helps regulate stress responses. This fine line between recreational and medical cannabis not being clear is the reason why we are seeing more countries around the world understanding that the illicit cannabis market won't disappear. So regulation instead of criminalization becomes the safer way to address public safety. Experienced users might access high-quality cannabis from the illicit market, but inexperienced patients face significant risks without the safety of regulated clinics. A prescription is safer, but access shouldn't depend on your wallet. That's why we need to continue advocating for turning this policy into widespread practical solutions, but that will be the topic of a future video. For now, remember that getting medical cannabis prescribed in the UK is legal, safe, and easier than you may think. Carly's done it, I've done it, and if you think medical cannabis could help you, take action by reviewing the 4 steps mentioned below this video. Get informed, get assessed, and get access. I'm Niels, and thank you once again for joining me on this trip through the psychoactive mind.